Shawn, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Good to be back.
So we did a previous episode talking about the dangers of AI and how it's going to manipulate the entire population, how to combat it, which was fascinating. We're recording a second episode just a couple hours after that. So anybody who has not seen that, I highly encourage you to go back and watch the previous episode with Shawn. It is some of the most intriguing content that we've ever recorded here. And so today, so you're no stranger to the show. So today we're going to get into the Monroe Institute and remote viewing, how you got involved in that, what's the Monroe Institute, talk about, some of the stuff that CIA and the Monroe Institute have collaborated on, and when it comes to remote viewing, and we'll get into it.
Nice.
But I am super pumped about this episode as well. We took a long lunch to reset our brains from the previous one. We're recording 2 in one day, but because it's a separate episode, everybody always gets a gift, no matter how many times you come on the show. You got any ideas?
I don't know. Let me guess.
Come on. Come on.
Thank you, sir. Nice.
Yeah.
Vigilance Elite gummy bears.
I feel like I just gave you the exact same bag with the exact same Vigilance Elite gummy bears
Thank you for regifting it.
about 4 hours ago. So
Back to me.
yeah,
I'm going to eat them. I'm going to share them with my son.
you should.
Yeah.
You should. I'll give you some extra ones.
Nice.
Since we're doing
Appreciate it.
2 episodes. But anyways, digging into, I've been very interested in the topic of remote viewing and the Monroe Institute. I found out about the Monroe Institute several years ago, just kind of digging around in some stuff and in remote viewing, seen some things. I won't go into it, but I've seen some things. Let's just say I've seen some things overseas. I've seen some people brought in, or let me rephrase that. I haven't seen these things. I know people who I've worked with who have seen these.
Well, they've used remote viewing for
Yes,
operations. Yeah.
and
It's effective.
it ever since that got put in my ear, I have just been intrigued by it and been wanting to dive in, and I haven't. It's the Monroe Institute has been a topic on. I have a sheet of different topics that I'm very interested in, that I want to interview people about, and on the same sheet is a list of names. It's like a dream list of who I want to interview.
Yeah.
Monroe Institute and remote viewing has been on there. It was one of the first things I put on the list, and then we had a conversation, and about somebody else, who you were prompting me to kind of get on the show, and I hope that happens. And then we got into a detailed conversation, and I was like, hey, you got to get in here. We got to do this. We got to do this.
Yeah.
And so thank you for coming, man.
Thanks for having me back, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's I know this one's just going to be just as.
I love this topic.
Me too. So let's just get right into it. What is the Monroe Institute?
So the Monroe Institute is one of the, if not the premier research institutes for consciousness expansion. And on the East Coast, at least, if not in the country. Now, that begs the question, okay, so what is consciousness? And consciousness is that place within us that we observe from. It's a separate space from our minds, because, like, if we talked about the last episode, we talked about one characteristic, one phenomenon of consciousness versus our mind's knowledge. if we can take our consciousness and see what our mind is doing with our emotions and stuff like that, see our mind in operation, that proves that consciousness is separate from our mind. And so we're not exactly sure. We don't have a complete definition of what consciousness is. No one agrees on the definition of consciousness. There are a lot of scientists out there that say consciousness is an emergent property of the complex system of our brains, and if our brains weren't there, we wouldn't have consciousness. And while that's true to a point, it doesn't necessarily say that consciousness is just in our brains. And I feel that the evidence that science is putting forward is that consciousness is actually out beyond our bodies as well as something that we experience through our bodies. But when you reach out of your body into consciousness, you can do things like remote viewing and to see into the future, to discern information, which, by the way, comes from a study that was done 90 times in 33 different independent labs in 14 different countries that showed human beings can literally look into the future regarding a task that they're doing now. Well, expansion out into that consciousness is that practice of taking your mind and going out beyond your body to find out the cool things that you can do with it and the cool things that you can experience with it and the new things that you can learn and the ways that you can use it for things like remote viewing. And so Monroe is that place that helps develop technology to help humans expand that consciousness out beyond their body and do really cool things with it. So they have, they invented this hemisync technology that everybody's talking about. They're the place that the CIA had that report out on the internet that was, popular on social media just recently of, the gateway tapes and the gateway protocol. They invented that, and that's what the government was using and experimenting with and researching regarding expansion of consciousness, using the human's innate ability to reach out beyond the body into consciousness to do cool stuff. That's what Monroe is.
Are they just into, I shouldn't say just, but is the focus remote viewing, or is there other aspects of consciousness that they're researching as well?
There are other aspects. They're number one in remote viewing because of their history of helping to develop a training program for the CIA and military industrial remote viewers that they developed the program for. They trained the people in the government who were remote viewers for a number of years before they actually had their own program set up internally. So that's kind of their pedigree and their history, is being the top place that trained all the remote viewers and put together a training program that allowed for people to do that kind of cool stuff. But then they branched out into other stuff, like Bob Monroe, who started the Monroe Institute, who's no longer with us. He was interested in all kinds of cool stuff and the utilization of technology to expand consciousnesses in multiple places. So now they got courses on how to reach out and communicate with extraterrestrial entities, like, some crazy fringe stuff. But they also have other stuff like how to train yourself for potentially having out-of-body experiences and extending your consciousness out to go see things, not in a remote viewing fashion, but to go see other places and other things that aren't local to your body consciousness. And they've got all kinds of stuff, and they do some, it's almost like a philanthropy or an outreach to spirits. One of their programs reaches out to lost souls that haven't found their way to their final destination after their death. They're confused about, where they are and what happened and yada, yada, yada. They lost their life suddenly and they're just wandering around. And they have a program that's designed to help go out and reach those folks and lead them into a place where they can, finally get to their final destination. It's like, and there's science up there that helps validate a lot of what they're doing in the physical realm to say there's evidence that proves that this stuff is effective. There's evidence, and like in the case of Joe McMoneagle, who was remote viewer number one for the Army Intelligence and CIA program that they put together, his evidence is irrefutable. Like, that's on government record that he did all this stuff and was able to go to other places from his living room in Virginia and then out an entire nuclear sub-program for the Russian military, where he was the only one in the room who drew the sub with all these characteristics, and then it proved to be completely accurate. And he drew it from his living room in Virginia.
That is the most remarkable. When we spoke on the phone,
Yeah.
and you told me about that is the most remarkable remote viewing piece of information I've ever heard.
That's not even his best one, but it's pretty impressive. You want me to tell the story?
Not yet. We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. I want to stick with the Monroe Institute, Bob Monroe.
Yeah.
And how long has the Monroe Institute been around?
Since the 60s, I believe.
Since the 60s?
Yeah.
I'm very interested in what you know. So the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and the Monroe Institute collaborated. A substantial amount of money was poured into the Monroe Institute to research. Is it research and develop, or did it start with research with remote viewing?
Well, the story that I got on the origin of Monroe Institute was that Bob Monroe was just simply interested in trying to figure out what technologies could assist with consciousness expansion. And he put together some programs, and all they had were gateway experiences back in the day. And
what is a gateway experience?
So the gateway is Bob's method of introducing binaural frequencies to where, for instance, you have 100 hertz in one ear and 104 hertz in the other ear. You can hear them both, but you can't hear 4 hertz. Normally it's below our audible level. But if you put two signals in your ears, right and left, that have a difference of 4 hertz, your brain then starts activating in a way to try to resolve that, and it turns on things because that's specifically right in the delta and theta transition area, and it can turn on experiences in your mind that would not normally be turned on in your consciousness. And so it gives you different experiences of consciousness. And so he started to experiment with that kind of technology, and that program, the Gateway, was introducing people into different levels of consciousness where you could experience deeper levels of concentration aided by the technology that they were putting in headphones, right? And so there's this guy, Skip, who was instructed to put together the remote viewing program for the military and CIA because they were getting reports that Russia was doing the same thing, that they were using psychics to look inside the secrets of the United States. So they needed to do an analysis of what kind of risk they were talking about and whether the United States should also investigate that type of technology.
Russia's doing this too.
Yeah, Russia was doing it at the time, and we were getting reports about it.
So they were ahead of us on this.
Yeah.
Is anybody else doing this that you're aware of?
From what I understand, although no one would admit it, every major country in the United States is implementing this type of program. Or excuse me, every major country in the world is implementing this. Like every first world nation is implementing this in their intelligence communities.
Wow.
Yeah, but no one wants to talk about it because, first of all, it's woo-woo crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. And second, you don't want to identify your best viewers because, for instance, like Joe was attempted assassinated 3 times.
Hey, you know what? People listening right now that think this is woo-woo, do a Google search, do a DuckDuckGo search, do a whatever the hell you want search, and just Google Monroe Institute, CIA, and the shit's going to come up.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
there you go. For all of you people that still believe in, that you got to hear it from a government source.
Yeah.
Which I can't believe. Whatever, but there it is. It's right there.
Yeah, I mean, they invested millions of dollars in Monroe. Skip, their old program director for remote viewing, came down and was just researching, trying to figure out what a training program might look like for a remote viewer. How do you expand somebody's consciousness, or how do you increase their level of psychic abilities? This is crazy stuff that they were investigating back then, but they wanted to make sure they weren't investing money in a bad way, or they weren't wasting it on charlatans, that type of thing. So he would go out to these places and investigate them. And Bob basically took him around, gave him a tour, but put him in a radio-shielded room with a pair of headphones on, started playing some tones in his ears, and Skip started floating up out of his body. So he thought that was pretty interesting. And so he put Monroe on a short list of places to investigate after he identified some folks who could possibly be good remote viewers. And so then he devised the idea that he said, okay, so we're looking for folks in the intelligence community. How do we find, who might be the psychics? And he looked for folks who were in their jobs longer than they should be. Because he thought, just as a common sense perspective, if these people are tuned into something extra, it's going to be the folks who are surviving longer in a shorter life expectancy job because they're making the right choices at the right times to stay alive. And it just so happened that Joe McMoneagle, who was remote viewer number 1, he had spent 14 years in the field as an operative. And he was in a job that the life expectancy was 20 months, and he had spent 14 years in that job. So they yanked him in and started interrogating him to ask him to, see if he was a double agent and was getting fed information on the other side. And when they figured out he wasn't, they sent him to Stanford Research Institute for testing, where Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, which I'm sure those names will ring some bells for folks who are interested in extraterrestrial stuff, because Hal's at the top of that chain as well. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were developing a program to try to test remote viewers, and they sent Joe McMoneagle out there, and he tested off the charts. He nailed every one of their tests except for one, and he got a second-place result on the last one.
What are some of these tests?
So basically the tests were, we have a target, you don't know who it is, and that target, through a double-blind process, has been instructed to go to a location. The target doesn't know where the target's a person, the target doesn't know where the location is until they're handed the envelope, tell them to go there. The targets have been randomized and put in envelopes, and then a dice gets rolled for a randomization to select where they're going. And the two people are never in the same room. They don't know each other. The remote viewer goes in a radio-shielded room that's separated in a different building, and the target, randomized location, they get the envelope, they open it up, they go there. And so then it's the job of the remote viewer to say, okay, your target is at a location. Tell us about the location. And that's it. That's all they get. So then the remote viewer goes into a little bit of a meditation to clear their mind. And Joe's explanation of remote viewing is like, you imagine a cardboard door in front of you, and you poke a hole in it. And you don't see the whole picture, but you start to see a little bit of it. And you get the little pieces of information about things. And he started drawing what he saw on the target location. And he would nail, and now here's the process of how a separate viewing gets viewed. It's a separate judge who isn't connected with the experiment at all, except he's judging the remote viewing versus multiple targets that could exist. So he doesn't know where the target is either. He gets a randomized selection inside a stack of targets, and he has to take the drawing that the remote viewer has made and the information that the remote viewer has written down, like any smells or any sounds or any images or what's, the shape of a building or something like that. And then he or she has to take that remote viewing drawing, and then match it to a number of things that are before him. So he doesn't know the target. He doesn't know the location. He doesn't had contact with the remote viewer or the target. He just takes a drawing and matches it to a bunch of stuff on a wall. And he says, okay, this looks the most like this. It's got this pattern that he drew. It's got this smell of this flower that's in the picture. It's got, whatever it is. And then at that point, you're graded. And if that independent judge has taken the remote viewer's information and matched it to the correct target, that's a first place finish, first place result. And Joe hit first place result after first place result after first place result. And they sent him to Meade at that point to start the remote viewing program. And now he didn't really believe it. He thought this whole thing was an operation on him. Like, how gullible is this guy? Like, can we string him along? How long is he going to be strung along for that we're telling him he's psychic? Although he kind of knew he was psychic because he'd get hints about operations in the jungle, and he was all throughout Vietnam, and he's gone to 110 countries. He's a legit field operative. So he's getting drops. He's going in and talking to tribal chiefs, making treaties and stuff like that. Like, he's a legit operator.
As a parent, my number one priority above everything else is my kids' well-being. I just want to see them chase their dreams experience all life's adventures, and really I just want them to thrive in today's world. But as a parent, I know that life can be unpredictable, and that is important to plan for the unexpected so that my kids can thrive in this world no matter what life throws at us. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and all on your schedule. You could go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. With over 1,700 five-star reviews, they're rated as excellent on Trustpilot. Fabric has more than just life insurance. Their easy digital platform also lets you create wills, access college savings funds, and manage your family's finances right from your phone, so your family is prepared for anything. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/Shawn. That's meetfabric.com/Shawn. MEET fabric.com/Shawn. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. I don't talk much about money or the economy, but let's face it, ignoring it doesn't help either. Because I believe the government screws up all the time. I think they let down veterans, ship jobs overseas, they help their rich friends make even more money. It is insane. Do you really think they care about helping us out with our money? I don't think so. That's one of the reasons why a lot of folks are stepping away from the government-run systems and starting to diversify their money into real assets like gold and silver. If you're concerned about your finances and the future of your finances like I am, there's a damn good play you can make. Check out Goldco. Goldco will hook you up with a free 2023 Gold IRA kit. This kit will teach you how to help safeguard your savings with real gold and silver. At the very least, it makes sense to get educated about your options. So get your free kit at goldco.com/Ryan or call 855-936-GOLD. Plus, for qualified orders, they'll send you up to $10,000 in free silver as a bonus while supplies last. Quit waiting around for politicians to rescue your finances. Help take control and handle your business yourself. So go ahead and check out goldco.com/Ryan or call 855-936-GOLD to get your free kit today. Just remember, performance may vary and always consult with a financial professional before making any investment decisions. You've heard the buzz about ketone supplements and how they can boost your workouts by helping your body use fatty acids for fuel. I take a shot of HVMN ketone supplement before my morning workout. It's focused energy. It's not an energy drink though. It's like a feeling of being in the zone. I don't feel hyper jittery, anxiety, stuff like I get when I drink too much coffee. They're great for cycling, long runs, and all kinds of workouts, and can help you stay sharper on a regular basis. We also just received some exciting news. In addition to being available in select Equinox gyms, Ketone IQ can now be found in local Sprout stores nationwide. I wish I'd had this product when I was on active duty. I get better endurance, I don't get the crash, and it helps curb my appetite. HVMN is offering my audience 30% off your first subscription order of Ketone IQ. You can save 30% off your first subscription order of Ketone IQ at hvmn.com/Shawn. Again, visit hvmn.com/Shawn and subscribe upon checkout for 30% off.
So he gets sent to Meade, and he doesn't quite believe that, he doesn't understand what this remote viewing is all about yet because he's brand new to the program. He's brand new to this experiment that they're trying to put together. So he tries to test himself on Skylab in 1978. I think it's coming down from, this is the first USS space station base. Like the International Space Station, there was a Skylab version of it back in the late 70s. Except it ran out of juice and they couldn't use it anymore, and it was going to come down out of orbit and fall down and break apart, but not quite burn up. And so they were really worried that major chunks of this, like refrigerator-sized stuff, was going to come down and land on somebody's head. Telemetry wasn't what it is today, so they had no idea where this thing was coming down or when it was coming down. They just knew it was coming down. It was in a decaying orbit, and eventually it was going to enter the atmosphere and could land literally anywhere on the planet. And they didn't know. And so he was like, all right, I'm going to test myself on this. He said, if I have an opportunity to fail, this is it. Because no one knows where this thing is coming down. And so I'll just go into my remote viewing process that I'm being taught how to do this, go into a meditation, see if I can figure this out. And he came up with a date, and he came up with a location. So this, as far as the scientists were concerned, they were like, okay, this is going to land somewhere, this is going to re-enter somewhere in this 6-month time frame is the best guess.
What year is this? Do you know?
It's like, I think it's like 78. Yeah, so it's back then before they had a bunch of awesome telemetry to know exactly where something was in space. Now they're tracking all kinds of things that are this big in our orbit.
So they have a 6-month window.
Yeah, basically.
Like it's going to land somewhere. Do they have a hemisphere?
No.
They just know it's going to hit the Earth in a 6-month time frame. Okay.
Yeah, because when it comes down will definitely determine where it lands on the planet, right? If it goes an extra 5 minutes in orbit, well, it could be whole another continent because of the speed that it's going, right? It's up in orbit at like 17,000 miles an hour or whatever. So he wrote down a date, and he walked up and put a pin on the map. And the pin on the map happened to be in Australia. And the date he missed by 6 days. So the date was close, but the pin that he put on the map, he missed the location of reentry by 30 miles, which statistically is 1 in 6,656,000. It's like hitting the lottery numbers on your first try to be able to identify where Skylab came down. If you were standing on the location where he put the pin on the map, you could look up and literally see Skylab breaking up in front of you.
Wow.
So Hal Puthoff said it was the best remote viewing of a future event that he'd ever seen, and I think still since, being able to identify where this thing was going to come down out of orbit. And so at that point, Joe thought, okay, well, maybe I'll stick with this remote viewing thing for a while.
What was the event that sparked CIA's interest in all of this?
Well, I think they were just motivated to try to investigate whether this had any merit for intelligence gathering and for operational information.
Was it Russia?
Yeah.
Russia's capability with remote viewing is what sparked the United States Central Intelligence Agency to start looking into this.
Yeah.
How much money did they dump into this program?
We don't know exactly. Joe personally told me over a lunch, millions. So more than one, officially. I don't know how many millions, but it was very important for the United States to be able to investigate whether or not this had intelligence capabilities and what level of benefit that could be gleaned from investigating this type of because they started getting amazing viewings out of Joe right away. And it's like, okay, well, how many amazing LeBron James of consciousness are there to say, this person can sit in a room and tell me what's going on at a location and potential future events? Because some of the remote viewers that the CIA used were able to produce the effects of nuclear tests that had been secret until the remote viewer said this is going to happen, be able to figure out whether it was going to be a success or a failure, because some of them were failures, and all the intelligence turned out to be correct. And so they were super interested. Joe McMoneagle never missed the location of a nuclear sub in his entire career because he explains that there's a high level of entropy in a reactor for a sub, and that just glows like a big bright light in consciousness where those locations of those types of entropy events are. So if anyone ever needed to know, like they lost track of where a nuclear sub was for the Russians, they'd go into Joe's office and he goes, right here. And they'd check their sensors and boom, it would be there.
Well, since we're talking about nuclear subs and Joe McMoneagle, tell me the story.
Yeah. Well, the one that made everyone sit up and take notice and got him more funding for a large number of years was when there was a building that was identified by intelligence personnel that became the top priority for the National Security Council. It was the largest building under one roof in the world. And it was high in the Russian tundra near this large body of water. So they thought it might be a manufacturing facility for some type of military craft. And they weren't sure what it was. And everybody wanted to know what was going on inside the building because they had triple death wire fencing. In between all those, they had sentries with dogs, 24-hour site-to-site sentry circle around the property, trains coming in, dumping off raw materials 24/7, food coming in, food service for the people who were working inside the building, and no one knew what was going on inside the building. And so someone at the National Security Council meetings knew that they had a new psychic program down at Meade and sent the manila folder down to Fort Meade, and they handed it to Joe McMoneagle. The first thing they handed him was simply map coordinates. And they said, show us what you see here. And he came up with the building that they were concerned about. And he described the building, and they said, okay, you're on target. And then they gave him a picture of that building. And they said, tell us what's going on inside here. Now, the guys at the National Security Council and all the intelligence guys who were in the room came to the consensus that it was going to be some kind of troop carrier that they could probably transport over to the ocean because it was 4 or 5 blocks away from the ocean, but it was short enough to where they could transport something of medium size over to the ocean to get it into the water. But that was their best guess. Joe McMoneagle was the only person who came up with the result. He dropped into the building and he started viewing this thing, and he viewed it over a number of days and came up with a drawing and an explanation and technical specifications for a brand new submarine. And he said, this is the biggest submarine in the world by far. It's 1.5 times bigger than the next biggest sub. This is the brand new classification of Russian sub. And he came up with a number of very unique characteristics for that sub. And he said, it's not a cylinder. It's a cylinder that looks like it's cut in half, spread out, and then a flat part welded on the top and the bottom. And the U.S. engineers looked at that later after he sent it, and he said, that's impossible. It'd be crushed at depth. You know, it's highly unlikely, et cetera. But then he added the specifications. It's got a special drive propulsion system that I don't want to say too much about, but it's also got canted launch tubes, which means it can fire nuclear missiles on the run without having to stop, which could give us about 20 minutes warning that we're going to lose 1,200 cities. So this is a first strike weapon. And it's, by the way, if you've seen the movie Hunt for Red October, that submarine that they used in that movie was the sub that Joe McMoneagle outed. He said it's almost 2 football fields long, it's 75 feet wide, it's 7 stories tall. He drew, and he's got a video of this that he sent up to the National Security Council. He drew a diagram of the sub with its specifications, with its very interesting technical advancements that the United States didn't have on their subs. And he's got the original tape that he submitted to the NSC, and this has been declassified, so he can share it now. So this is the tape that he reported up to the NSC before the thing was launched, and proved him correct. But he sent all that up, and Robert Gates was the guy who is collecting all the information for the people disseminating the information for the National Security Council. Didn't even let it through.
Really?
Yeah, because he's like, this came from a psychic. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he looked at it, and he's like, looked at the report, and he's like, okay, the sub, the engineers said the sub can't survive at depth. It's way too big. He's the only guy who thinks it's a sub. It's not. They're not going to be able to roll this off into the water. There's no water there, and it's too big to transport over to the ocean. So he wrote total fantasy on top of the report and sent it back to Joe at Meade. Joe is not pleased. He's a little bit of an attitude, and he's a really good operative who's now just been put into this remote viewing thing where he's had some success in. And he's like, I know this is a sub. And so he took that total fantasy remark and he wrote under it, He went back into a meditation, and he looked at the sub again. He looked how far along was it, and he made an estimation of how long it was going to take to launch this thing. And he goes, "Yeah, well, your total fantasy launches in 112 days. Send it back to Robert Gates at the Pentagon."
How did that go?
Well, Robert Gates has a little bit of an ego. The good news is someone at the National Reconnaissance Office picked up this pissing match, and they were curious. And so they tasked a satellite to do a flyover at 114 days from that date that he said 112 days. And they snapped pictures of the Red October submarine, 7 stories high, 75 feet wide, almost 2 football fields long, canted launch tubes, special propulsion, the whole thing. He nailed it all.
Are you serious?
Yeah. 2 cylinders separated with flat pieces in between, right next to a brand new canal that they built right next to the building in from the sea, so they could roll it off into the water. So they built a canal in the 4 months that he said they were going to launch it in, and just dumped it into the canal right next to the building. So that was interesting. And they were 2 days into, they had all their hatches wide open because they were loading reactor cores and missiles 2 days into the process of loading missiles. So he nailed it to the day, including all the specifications. And no one believed him. And it was one of the greatest information gathering operations for any launch of any Russian equipment since and to this day.
I would imagine that sparked a lot of interest in remote viewing in Robert Gates, in Robert Gates' mind. So what, and I'm sure a lot of other minds and organizations. So what happened after this?
So the fringe folks who were starting to investigate remote viewing and sending tasks down to Meade became most of the intelligence agencies in the United States government started overtasking the remote viewers down there. So they got crushed.
How many remote viewers were there?
There were a bunch. I mean, there were 4 or 5 that they had as a stable, and then they were trying out other individuals, bringing people in, letting people go, because they were like less effective. But it was a constant barrage of life or death situations. Tell us what you can see. These are special operations that are going live. Tell us which way we need to turn. What's going on? Somebody just got kidnapped. We got probably 18 hours before he's dead. Help figure out where he went. A lot of missing people and missing operators. To tell us where he is, we'll go get him. And that was taxing on a lot of those remote viewers, and they got burned out pretty quick. And so that's where Monroe Institute stepped in to help provide a training program that could give them a faster cool down and a deeper focus on being able to get good information in a quicker time, so that they didn't have to spend so much time prepping and meditation to be able to get in and get a good viewing on something.
How long are these guys spending in meditation?
Well, it depends on the viewer, but you could do like in the early days. I think Joe told me he was spending, 45 minutes to an hour to try to figure out a place where he could get to where he could get a good bit of information. But in his later years, after he was practiced, and this is why plasticity matters here, where your brain changes in form and function to help you do, like you play the piano, and then all of a sudden you get better at playing the piano because your brain just gets used to it and says, okay, I need to play the piano better. Shooting baskets, you get that muscle memory. Well, that's your brain changing to help you shoot those baskets better and just drain the 3. Doing crossword puzzles, your brain will change in form and function to help you do the crossword puzzles faster. Well, it turns out remote viewing is the same way. Later in his life, when he was doing remote viewing, like for one example, he got a call one night when he was in Las Vegas from the local sheriff who was looking for a missing child. And the mom thought the child was with dad, and the dad thought the child was with mom, and it's getting dark when they figured out the child is missing. And it's in Virginia wilderness and in the county in which Joe lived. And there's wild animals, and it's getting cold at night, and the kids may not make it. He got a call in the middle of the night by the sheriff who's like, let's get the psychic on the phone. And Joe immediately picked up the phone, closed his eyes for like 5 seconds, and then basically told the sheriff, he goes, send your deputy out this road to this particular location. Have him stop the car, get out of the car, get his compass out. And at 318 degrees on his compass, I want you to walk 1,209 steps. Stop, call the child's name out, and he will respond. And that was like within 5-10 seconds of getting the call and asking, what the details were. And then he gave a reading. And so he goes back to bed thinking, okay, hopefully they're going to find the kid. If they follow his directions, they will. About 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, you get another call in his hotel room, and he's pissed because it's ringing the phone in the middle of the night again. So he gets up, grabs the phone. Hello? Joe, we sent our officer out there to the spot where you said, and he pulled out his compass, but this officer just said he got back from training last week regarding missing children, and he said the statistics are that kids 10 and under will not walk up a hill when they're lost. But he's looking at his compass reading, and it goes directly up a steep hill. What do you want us to do? And his answer was immediate. It's like, do what I told you to do. Click. And so then another 5-10 minutes goes by, and he gets another call, and he picks up the phone a little softer this time because I think he had a feeling that they found him. He's like, did you find him? And she goes, yes, Joe, thank you very much. Good night. And so the officer, against his training, went up the hill, 1,209 steps, followed the directions, stopped where he was, called out the child's name, and the kid answered him because he had walked up the hill to get to a cabin, and he was sleeping on the back porch sofa of a cabin that was deserted at the time, but it had a light on. And he was a 5-year-old kid, and he said, my daddy said if I ever got lost, walk to the closest light and stay there. And so he went up the hill and was sleeping on the back porch of that cabin. And Joe sent that state trooper up the hill, called out his name, and the kid woke up and answered him.
Wow.
And it took literally 5 seconds for him to get the original viewing and all that stuff's like documented, right? I mean, these aren't, bullshit, made up stories. Like, he's got legitimate government records, and he was awarded the Legion of Merit after retiring for all of the stuff and all of the aid that all the operational intelligence that he provided that saved people's lives. So it's possible to reach out beyond your regular physiology and see things that aren't local to you because consciousness is out beyond our body. And you just have to be able to project yours to see other places and other things. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. The more you practice it, the better you can do it. And the more reliable it is.
As much as I want to keep talking about Joe McMoneagle,
yeah,
it's going to be where we have a collaborative effort here
yes.
to get him in the studio to tell his story. And I am very much hoping and praying that happens.
I just saw him because I just got back from Monroe Institute, and I think he wants to come on. We're going to try to figure out how to get that done. He doesn't travel so well, so maybe we might figure something out. But he knows who you are and likes you and likes the show, and so that kind of helped. But he's a guy that when he calls the Pentagon picks up the phone and says, "Yes, Joe." So he's one of those untouchable guys. He's an amazing get. I'd love to have him come here and hang out and talk with you because his stories are amazing. And he is the real deal. He's a national treasure of what he's done for the United States and United States intelligence with his abilities.
Well, we're going to do everything we can. So, and I really hope that happens. But you are now an official ambassador of the Monroe Institute. You've done some of this testing. You're getting into not Monroe Institute. You're getting into remote viewing.
Yeah.
And so, how did you get involved with the Monroe Institute?
It was in my research to try to figure out what consciousness was and how it worked that I ran into a documentary that included Joe in it, called Third Eye Spies. And it was about how Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff put together the remote viewing programs for the government back in the day. And it was the story about the origin and what they did to try to create a remote viewing training program and testing and put a scientific method behind the whole thing. And then in the latter part of that documentary, they interviewed Joe and had him on there and told a couple of stories about his accolades. And it was through that I found out he was still alive, that he was still teaching remote viewing. And I was like, that's amazing. I want to go meet this guy and see what this is all about, because if I'm writing a book about consciousness and I believe that it goes on beyond the body, I want to go meet a guy who's actually proven it. And so I got signed up for his course and went up to Monroe, took his remote viewing course, and that was amazing, by the way, because not only did he go through the double-blind protocol and how to clear your mind and what you're looking for and how to just take whatever your mind is giving you and put it on the paper and don't judge it and don't name it. Just take the raw information, the raw data, and put it down, and then let somebody else judge if you've hit the target or not. Through that process, people who are brand new to remote viewing in the class were blowing their own minds on how well they could see things they had no idea about. Because you got to understand, when you go up there to do a remote viewing course, all they give you is a reference number. They give you a blank sheet of paper and they say, B43, go. That's it.
What is B43?
It's the fucking number on the envelope of the image that you're supposed to look into the envelope and see what's in there.
So when day one, week one,
Yeah.
at the Monroe Institute for Remote Viewing, you get an envelope with a photograph.
You don't even get the envelope. You can't touch it.
Can't touch it.
They say they've got a stack of envelopes up front, and then they say, okay, not everybody gets the same one. They say your name, and then they give you a reference number out of their stack of envelopes is up at the front. And so you get a letter and a number, or just sometimes a number, or just sometimes a couple of letters, or whatever it is, and that's it. That's all you get. And then you start to close your eyes and you start to envision, what are you getting from a hearing sensation, a taste sensation, what is it that your mind is giving you at that moment, and you try to record it on the piece of paper. And that's it. That's all they give you is just a reference number.
Without any of these technologies, this is bare bones.
Yeah.
No frequency work, nothing.
Yeah, because they start with just a blind read, and then they start to implement the technology of the signals in the headphones and stuff like that, so you can see the difference, see how it improves your ability to view and your results, etc. But from go, they just give you a number and they say start drawing.
So walk me through this process.
So
you get your reference number.
Yep, you get your reference number, and then you're supposed to quiet your mind and see if you can clear whatever's going on in your mind for a moment, the thoughts. And then you look for, show me the target that's associated with B43 or whatever your reference number was. And then your mind starts to do whatever it does. And whatever it gives you, you try to record that and you try to remain on your target. Like, you don't think about lunch tomorrow. You don't think about conversation you had with somebody earlier in the day. You don't think about, whatever it is that your mind wants to go to. You're focusing on the target. You want the information about the target. If your mind starts to wander, you just say, target. And whatever your mind gives you, that's the remote viewing. And sometimes you'll hit it, sometimes you won't, but you draw whatever it is that your mind gives you.
So what was your mind giving you?
My first remote viewing ever, which convinced me that it was real. I was in my check unit doing my drawing, and this is a little place of a little cubby hole that you go and sit so you can be by yourself and focus on your own thoughts so that no sounds distract you, etc. No light comes in if you don't want it. I flashed in front of my mind flashed in front of my vision with my eyes closed, the idea of a round spider web. Is the best thing that I could, and your brain will equate some things to be as close as, like, whatever it shows you, it'll be close to, but maybe not exactly what it was. So I just saw like a spider web, and I saw multiple lines going out from the center, and I saw multiple lines connecting the lines that were going out, so it kind of looked like a spider web. But then in the middle, there was a big blotch of opaque material, whatever it was, I don't know. So basically I drew like a spider web with a big old dot in the middle of it, scribble, scribble, scribble. And that's all that I got. So we go back down after doing our drawings to the room where they handed us our target. And the first target, everybody does the same because they have it on a slide that they're going to show. So you come in there and they say, okay, you're going to be remote viewing, and they gave you a reference number, but everybody gets the same reference number. You go off and you draw whatever it was. And then they show you, everyone in the next slide, what it is. And the next slide that they showed was, and they have a standard database that they pull from. These are images that are used for testing remote viewing, and they're all randomly selected usually. So no one can cheat. No one knows what's going to come up, that type of thing. But this one is the first one they gave us, so they had it on the slide. And the next thing that they showed us was a white background with black pen illustration of an old Ferris wheel from the 1920s that had a number of lines going out from the center. And where the lines got too thick for the pen, the lines converged, there was a huge black dot where the pen lines all just kind of merged together into a bunch of ink. And I looked down at this spider web with this black dot in the middle of it. And it wasn't exactly, because I drew a spider web because that's what was presented to me in my mind. But it was a goddamn circle with a bunch of connecting lines and a big dot in the middle of it, just like the frame was.
What was what's going through your head at this point?
Holy shit. I'm freaking out. I'm going to remote viewing at Monroe, and I'm like, first of all, I don't expect to be able to do anything at all.
Yeah.
Because I've never done it before. I don't know what happens here. I don't know anything about remote viewing. I'm just up here basically to meet this amazing guy. And so I'm not expecting anything. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. I don't even know if it's real. Because, who knows? Could this whole Joe McMoneagle thing be a complete disinformation campaign to try to lead foreign intelligence down the wrong road and have them waste time on psychics and all this other stuff going through my mind? And then I drew 80 to 90% of the first image, first try out of the gate. And I thought that was interesting. And then maybe that was just a lucky guess. And what happened after that, all throughout the week, is that I kept getting first place results. Viewing after viewing after viewing. And again, this is the same process that they use where you get a randomized reference number that's unique to you. You go and you draw whatever you get. And then you're handing it to another person who's a judge who has to then take 4 images, random images, and say, okay, your drawing best matches this thing. And I kept putting out drawings that would match the right one. Because only one of the distractors on the paper would be the actual target. And they would have to say, this matches, because they didn't know which one it was, this matches this image. And that was the target. Time after time. And I was just like, that's crazy. And this is real.
What are these? One, how long did it take you to come up with the spider web?
Almost immediately. It was the first thing that flashed in when I closed my eyes, that spider web kind of like out of the darkness flashed in a white light in front of my face. It was like,
and that's it?
That was it.
That was big, and then you drew it, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's
it kept flashing. Like I kept because I was doubting it. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, bullshit. This isn't it. It's not a spider web.
You're like, all right, fuck it, I'm just going to draw this spider web.
Yeah, basically.
Like total disbelief.
It wouldn't go away. It kept flashing in front of my face. I tried to draw up other stuff, which is a whole nother process that you're not supposed to do, which I didn't know, but he taught us later. He's like, don't do that. Don't do this. Don't put any meaning to it. Don't put an analytical overlay that you think this is an apple or whatever. Just take the basic information that you're given, because the shape, although it might look like an apple to you, might be something else. So don't draw an apple if it kind of looks like an apple, but it's two separated C's that are opposite that kind of looks like an apple to you. Don't draw an apple. Just draw what you see, the two opposite C's, because it might be something else. So I tried to push it out and it wouldn't go away, and I was like, all right, well, this is wrong. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. I didn't come up here to succeed. I came up here to meet this guy. And then it turned out to be right. And I was blown away.
I mean, you obviously impressed the Monroe Institute.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did good at remote viewing, but a lot of people do good at remote viewing. I mean, you might be surprised. Joe will tell you right off the bat, everyone has this capability. It's whether or not you use it. And the thing that people call the sixth sense, he says, is the first sense. Like, that's the way we grew out of the bush and developed and evolved. That sixth sense was the first sense that could keep you out of danger and keep you surviving in the wild. Like when you knew that there was a big cat in that bush or whatever it was going to kill you, and you stayed away from it and you survived. He says that's the first sense. That's how he survived 14 years in a 20-month life expectancy position in intelligence, is that he just followed his hunches. He followed his gut. He told us a story the other day. It was amazing. He went out at the end of his career. He was sent out to do a drop with a Russian agent, and he was sent along with a guy who was an administrator inside intelligence but had never done any field work. And they got to Greece where they were going, and the guy had made a reservation down at the beach of a really nice resort, and he goes, "We can't go there. That place is going to be bombed." And they went on, and the guy screwed up the operation, and Joe wound up getting the drop because he identified the guy and got the drop. And then they came and were about to get ready to leave for the airport to go fly back, and a bomb went off in that hotel where they had the reservations. Right? So that kind of stuff we're wired into as human beings.
Yeah.
Because it's part of consciousness. It's what helps bring consciousness into our body, is a larger field of conscious energy that you can reach out into and sense other things that are outside your body and outside space and time, like into the future, which is how he was able to predict the coming down of the Skylab.
I mean, the bomb story, I can relate to in my 14 years of operations within, the different SEAL teams, the agency, all that. I mean, there is a feeling, that you do get when things are about to happen. And so I can understand that.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
But
well, he says everybody's tagged into this. Like, everybody's connected into it. It's whether or not you use it and whether or not you exercise it that where you can actually get better at it or not. And so, you go through this week and you get a little more confidence and you get a little bit more trusting in the process. And all of a sudden, most of the class is nailing their assignments in remote viewing.
no kidding.
I mean, it's amazing.
That was a question of mine. I wanted to know how many people were in your group, roughly.
Yeah, roughly about 20. And I'd say about 14 or 15 of them were nailing first place results most of the time.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a bunch of seconds and a bunch of thirds where people, and even Joe misses sometimes. Other world-class remote viewers, sometimes you're on target, sometimes you're off. I mean, you're not nailing it all the time. And that was prevalent in the class. Like, I had a couple of things that I missed on that were different exercises. But even when I was asked to drop into the body of they have a remote viewing that's a medical nature, where you're supposed to guess the medical condition of a reference number again. They just give you a number. And they said, drop into this person's body and what's going on. And I was like, I had a feeling. I was just like, there's pain here. There's pain here. To me, that's kind of a right knee replacement, like where they cut the leg and put a knee in. And there's all kinds of pain here, and it's like glowing and whatnot. I was like, I don't know, right knee replacement. Nailed it. How the hell did I do that? I don't know. I mean, you're reaching out into consciousness and touching on a reference number from an individual who's a real individual. They've agreed to be a target that somebody can, guess what I have, guess my ailment. And it's not the only thing I came up with, because I was like, she's had her appendix out. She's on medication for high cholesterol, which is messing with her liver. She needs to get her liver checked. I came up with a whole laundry list of stuff because I didn't even know what they're talking about. But I was like, there's a right knee replacement. And they looked and they were like, that's right.
Were you right about all of it?
No, I don't know about all of it. But the target was, their result that they were looking for was right knee replacement.
So what did that visualization look like?
It was more of a feeling.
It was an intuition.
Yeah, it was like I said, okay, target, and I just started feeling around my own body of what was going on. And I'm in good health. I don't have any health problems at all. So, but that's what I felt. I was like,
you felt your knee.
Yeah, I felt the knee. I felt the pain here and here, like above and below the knee. And I was like, well, that means they're probably replacing the knee. It's not just the hurt knee. They're probably going through an operation to replace the knee. But then I also felt stuff in my liver. I felt like my cholesterol was high when I don't have high cholesterol personally. I felt like my appendix is gone, right side. And my appendix is still in me. So I don't even have a scar or whatever. But I don't know if it was all correct, but I got the one thing that was correct that they were looking for.
Earlier you had mentioned they put you in a room where it's shielded from, did you say radio signal or radio waves?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Just to have control over the potential for signals to come in and out of the room to give you information. Like, they want to remove all potential for any, interference or
external frequency. Would that manipulate the meditation?
I don't know the science behind whether or what frequencies might interfere with a viewing, but I know that they want to make sure that there's no signals coming in to where you'd have a gadget or something that could communicate information to you about a target. Like, they want to have strict scientific controls to make sure that the data they're getting, because they're still studying this stuff right now. They're still studying the science of remote viewing and the ability to look out through consciousness. And they want to just make sure that there are no outside interferences, that they maintain a complete separation between the remote viewer and the target. For instance, if they're practicing, target identification. And some of that stuff is amazing, where the remote viewer will say, okay, this person's standing in this certain office of this certain building. Here's the complex. Here are the other buildings around it, yada, yada, yada. And they nail the whole thing. They want to make sure that there's no way to get any information in through radio signals or collusion of people trying to scam the system or whatever. They want to make sure that they have those controls all the time so they can rely on the data that they're getting. It's amazing stuff.
It is. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's get into some of the technology when they started implementing that. Back from the break, we were talking about your initial experience with remote viewing and without technologies. I wanted to talk to you about what are some of the technologies that they implemented, and how did that improve your remote viewing experience? Yeah,
well, they use the binaural technologies that they developed there at Monroe, because they invented binaural beats, right? Where you have one frequency in one ear and one frequency in the other ear, and the difference between the two, your brain then has to rectify, and it turns on special areas in your brain that can then allow for weird experiences or cool experiences to occur, and expansions of consciousness. I just got back from a discovery program where they put a bunch of EEG sensors on your head and look at your brain waves while you're meditating, and then put signals in your ears to try to figure out what's going on, and actually watch your brain in real time to see what's going on with your delta waves, your theta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, and then at the top, gamma waves. And the way they graph them, they make cool little designs and whatnot, or shapes that can signify you in different levels of conscious awareness. And it's really cool stuff that they have operating up there. I talked to the folks up there, and they would love for you to come by and experience it for yourself.
Really?
Yeah, and on their dime, just come up and take a couple of courses and meet Joe McMoneagle, the remote viewer, and see for yourself. Because a lot of things, like I could try to sit here and tell you, here's my experience, and here's, but it's better for you just to go there and see it for yourself and actually dig deep into your own consciousness and what you can do with your mind based on the technologies that they're assisting you with, because they've been doing this stuff for decades and they're really good at it.
So they're willing to have me go to the Monroe Institute and test my remote viewing abilities.
Oh, yeah.
I am down. This is happening. This is definitely happening. I would love to do that.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, to talk about it is one thing, but you really got to dive in and, like, if you want to experience what it's like and, the things that you see, feel, sense in your own consciousness connected with, doing a remote viewing or doing a consciousness expansion experience, that's one of those things where you just got to dive in and do it,
I am 110% going to take you up on that.
Done.
So, Monroe Institute, here I come. This is happening.
That's awesome.
I'm pumped.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going. I am going. We'll talk after the show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about the technologies. Let's talk about, we talked on the break a little bit about going into the future, looking into the future, but it's right now, from what we've discussed thus far, everything to include Joe McMoneagle, all of the remote viewing stuff that we've talked, well, I guess not. The space station that crashed, that would have been in the future.
Yeah.
But most of what we're talking about is actually in the present. What is this diagnosis that's happening? What is the pain this woman's feeling in her knee?
Yeah.
What is the picture in the envelope?
Yeah.
And so, but also remote viewing is also looking into the future.
Yeah. And there's actually a really cool study that was done because, there's so many people out there listening right now who are saying, oh, this is complete bullshit. And there are a lot of scientists out there who are like, okay, well, show me a peer-reviewed published study that shows that this stuff can occur. And, even with the Joe McMoneagle, the argument is N equals 1 isn't really proof of anything. Like, one guy might have amazing abilities for whatever reason. To get it to the bottom of this, we need to study it a lot more. And it doesn't even prove that more than one person has this. There was actually a really cool study that I want to tell you about that proves that average humans can look into the future. And this is without a doubt, like beyond Six Sigma proof, which is science's gold standard of this is a phenomena, that type of statistical proof that human beings can literally look into the future. And it was on an ironclad study that even the most vehement skeptics weren't able to poke any holes in. And it started with a study that was done on what's called priming. So they put a bunch of people in a chair in front of a computer system, and the computer ran the whole experiment, randomized the whole thing, selected out of a database, grabbed images and words that were connected with a study that they wanted to do regarding putting a picture of, let's say, a kitty in front of somebody. And so they show you this picture of this kitty on the screen, and then a few seconds later, they give you the option to select cute or ugly, binary choice. So you press button 1 or button 2, and then they measure you, because it's a computer, they can measure down to the split second, 100th of a second, how fast you're selecting your word associated with the image. But then they make it complicated one step further. For 1/30th of a second, before they even show you the picture of the kitty, randomly selected over the two words, they will flash one of the words in front of you that your conscious awareness can't pick up because we can't see 1/30th of a second, but the subconscious does pick it up. So your subconscious mind sees the 1/30th of a flash of the word right before they show you the kitty. And it's either cute or ugly that they flash before it. Now, if it's cute, you'll select cute faster. If you think kitties are cute, you might hate kitties. I don't know. You might say, all cats are ugly, right? They control for all that. But basically, if they flash ugly before the kitty, then it will take you a split second longer to select cute. And this is a perfect study because there's no study investigator and human interaction, so there's no human-to-human interaction that can occur there to where you're skewing the results. There's no clue about what the selection needs to be from any other source. It's just a computer running the experiment. So this is from a psychological sciences perspective, this is a perfect study because it's only a human being measured by a computer with a completely randomized set of data that's being placed in front of the human and measuring how fast they can react to something based on a stimuli that they put right before the whole process goes through.
Okay.
Okay.
Help me understand how this is looking into the future.
Okay. This next study switches it around. So this next researcher who wanted to investigate whether or not this primer had any influence on these people in the future, he took the primer from over here at the beginning of the process and he simply put it over here at the end of the process. So then the new experiment became, I'm going to show you a picture of a kitty or whatever, and then I'm going to give you 2 words, and then at the end, in that 1/30th of a second flash, after you have already made your choice, after you've already pressed your button and made your decision, we're going to flash the primer afterwards. So there should be absolutely no way, if you're looking at the picture, selecting your word, and then getting a primer afterwards, that primer should influence the speed at which you make your decision and click your button on whichever word you want to choose, right? Should have absolutely no effect, except it did. The primer flashed after your decision, altered the timing in which you could select the cute or ugly word choice in the same way that it did when you put it before. And not only did it occur, it occurred in 90 different experiments in 33 different independent labs in 14 different countries to over a 6 sigma significance, statistical significance. So they basically proved in that set of studies, in this meta-study that's published at National Institutes of Health, by the way, on the website, that humans, the consciousness of humans, like they don't do this consciously, but something in their subconscious looks into the future, sees that primer, and it affects the speed at which they can select cute or ugly based on the image that they've been given, and yet the primer happens after the fact that they've taken the choice. It still affects their speed at which they make the choice, which means they're looking into the future.
So hold on. So with no prompt, what are we calling it, a prompt?
The primer.
A primer with no primer on the front or the back.
Well, they have one on the front or the back. The first set of experiments was on the front.
Okay.
And it affected people as they expected it to. Mm-hmm. But they put it on the back, and they didn't expect it to affect people, and then it did.
But the constant would be without a primer, correct?
They have control groups that were without a primer. Yeah,
that's what I meant.
Yeah, they had both experiments had a control group where they didn't have a primer.
So if the primer on the back end, you have one without it, one with it, you're faster with the one on the back end, and the primer happens after the decision has been made.
Yeah. In the congruent way that the primer would want to influence you if it was put in the front, the same type of results happen when they put it on the back. And that proved that basically consciousness was tied into non-locality, the quantum mechanics, right? Because quantum mechanics is something that is independent of space and time. It's not affected by time. So what that's proving to us, or what that's suggesting to us, not proving is a very strong word. What that's suggesting to us is that consciousness can reach into the future and see a future bit of data and influence your decision in the now. 90 studies proved it.
Wow. How about the past?
No studies that I know of. How to structure that type of experiment, I don't know. But that's a suggestion that consciousness goes out beyond the body. So another piece of science that can help prove that consciousness may be beyond the body and in a field of energy that just is at the fundamental core of who and what we are and the universe that exists around us, was an experiment they did with a slime mold. Now, a slime mold is a number of single-celled amoeba that come together in a colony that creates this slime mold that then moves around together as a bunch of single-celled creatures with identical DNA.
So it's a crowd of amoebas.
It's a crowd of amoebas that work in conjunction with each other, but they take on different functions within the slime mold itself. So these single-celled amoeba start to come together and create like internal organs that have different functions. That these slime mold amoeba over here do different things than these slime mold amoeba over here do, and including an immune system response where 1% of these individual creatures go around swallowing up the pathogens that find themselves within the slime mold, and they drop out of the bottom of the slime mold, self-sacrificing. They die, and the pathogen dies along with them, which is an altruistic act at a single-celled organism scale. They throw themselves on a grenade for the rest of the slime mold at a single-celled organism scale. So they did an experiment with these things, and they put some oatmeal in the path of, there's a Japanese researcher, so they used the population centers around Tokyo, Japan. And they had this train system that would ship people around that the engineers put together with computers and a group of engineers, and they let this slime mold go on these little piles of oatmeal. And what slime molds will do is they'll build a little tube system to ship the nutrients around when they find the food so that everybody gets fed. And so it spreads out and it starts finding these piles of oatmeal and starts creating these tube systems. And within 24 hours, the single-celled organisms of this slime mold had a tube system that looked exactly like the Japanese rail system that the engineers in the computer had built, except they took millions of dollars and months to build the train design for the computer systems to put together. The engineers did. The slime mold did it in 24 hours. It did it in a more efficient fashion than the train system wound up being, and was more efficient and would have cost less money had the Japanese engineers built it that way, that the slime mold built it. Right? So these are single-celled organisms that figured out a better train system for Tokyo, Japan than Tokyo, Japan had actually built. Where does that intelligence come from, except below the level of the cells themselves, coming up into the cells?
Holy shit.
So that's another pretty good proof that consciousness is something that is more of a field of intelligence that we tap into. That certainly gives us animation, certainly gives us the ability to experience things, right? We have this body, and if our brain gets blown off or whatever, it certainly limits our ability, and we have brain damage and malformations. It certainly restricts our ability to experience consciousness, but it doesn't come from this brain. It comes through this brain. And the consciousness is actually something that's out in the field. This is why things like remote viewing can be real. This is why things like ESP and prediction of action can be real. Reaching out.
What is ESP?
Extrasensory perception.
What is that?
Psychic ability, like being able to know, under which cup the ball is when you have no idea what it is. Kind of a remote viewing functionality, or psychic ability, interfacing with spirits. That can make that possible from a scientific standpoint. Crazy
So
stuff.
do you think we all share the same consciousness? Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a minute since I've done a Bub's Naturals commercial, but it has not been a minute since I've taken the best shit of my entire life. Actually, just knocked one out this morning. It was amazing. And I'm going to give you the secret. You ready? Here's the secret. You want the secret for the best shit of your entire life that you could do, I don't know, every day, maybe multiple times a day? Here's the secret. Bub's Naturals Collagen Peptide says it's good for joints, hair, skin, and nails. I'm surprised they don't put on there, it'll give you the best shit of your entire life, but hey, I get it, right? And you mix that with the Halo Creamer, that's MCT oil. Put these two together, you're gonna have a explosive hell of a day. These things are both Whole30 approved, NSF certified, and USDA approved. So there's that. On top of that, hold on, wait, there's more. If that doesn't get you going, which I guarantee you it will, you've got Bub's new coffee. So this is the first ever coffee bean Whole30 approved, if you can believe that. And we all know coffee can, speed things up a little bit in the morning. But hold on, wait, there's more. Apple cider vinegar gummies. Guys, I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly what these things do for you, but here it says, promotes energy, immune support, promotes healthy digestion, and supports healthy metabolism. I can tell you one thing. Good luck just eating one of these things, because at the end of the night, I will crush an entire bottle of these. That will not give you the best shit of your life. I wouldn't recommend it. It will speed things up, but you may not like the final outcome. And hold on, wait. There's more. There's more. Bubs came out with a lot of new products. They have these hydrate or die hydration packets. Great for post-workout. All this stuff is great for post-workout, especially the collagen protein. Guys, here's another thing about Bubs. Bubs is a tribute company. It's named after Glenn Bubs Doherty, who was a Navy SEAL and a CIA contractor. He died defending our freedom in Benghazi. And Bubs donates a portion of every order to the Glenn Doherty Foundation, and they donate 100% of the proceeds from their products on Veterans Day every year. I love this company. They are just solid people with a solid product, and they just want everybody to experience the best shit of your life. Go to bubsnaturals.com, use the promo code Shawn for 20% off, and let's get it going.
So if consciousness is a field energy, quantum mechanics, the theory behind it is that there are a number of field energies that come together, and they're all one field. It's all one thing throughout the one universe. So electron field has one field for the whole universe. But then there's a local expression of the electrons in this chair, for instance. Like there's a probability that this electron is going to be in this place with this movement on this atom, et cetera, and then it becomes real when you interact with it. When an observer is present, the wave function collapses, et cetera. So there's a one big field of electrons, but then there's the local expression of the electron right here. I think if consciousness is a non-local field, it's going to do the same thing. So yes, we can share the one big consciousness, which is the consciousness of the field itself, but then there are local expressions of our consciousness that come through our brain and become our individual existences. So while you can be you and I can be me, we're sharing that same conscious field that connects us. And the only difference between you and me in that scenario is that you started with your physiology and you had your experiences and you had your life story and you came from wherever you came from. And I came through my experiences, my life story, my physiology. And so in reality, I can see you as another version of me that simply has your bag of tricks. And I'm just another version of you that came through my experiences.
Have there been any other experiments on this?
Yeah, some. Like the Institute for Noetic Sciences is all over this stuff from a scientific perspective. That was started by Edgar Mitchell, who was an astronaut who went to space and had a unitive experience, one with everything, wanted to put some science behind that and started the Institute for Noetic Sciences. And they're doing stuff like looking for gene expressions in DNA for psychic abilities, and they're finding results.
They're finding results.
Yeah. Like the stuff that the first studies that they've done are pioneered studies that they need to replicate. And, the science isn't conclusive or anything, but they've had the first foray into studying whether or not there are gene expressions that correlate with psychic ability. They've found a connection. So we may not, we may have a physiological switch to turn on and turn off to be able to have extra conscious awareness.
This stuff is fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, we don't have all the answers to all this stuff, but it's cool to explore and discuss because, I mean, there are things in us as humans that we don't explore and we can do that we just don't do. And so we don't have the benefits of them because you're just not doing them, but we can do them right now. Like, there's stuff that everyone listening to this can do.
Wow. This is, wow. What other kind of courses do they offer over at Monroe Institute?
Well, I just got done with the Discovery program, which scans your brain and shows you your brain waves in deep meditation and through the experiences that they give you. They also have courses where you can go in and try to connect with extraterrestrial entities, that kind of stuff. Because if we're connected with consciousness, that means they're likely connected with consciousness too. And you can reach out and say hi non-locally through being wherever you are at the moment that you are and the place that you are, and reaching out and saying hi, because non-locality means there's no limitation of space and time to get a message through. You can go out and look for lost souls that haven't quite made it to heaven yet and lead them where they were confused, lost their life suddenly or whatever it is, and they're wandering around, they don't know where they're going. Find them and kind of handhold them to this central location where they can then zip off to their final destination. Like, they do cool, crazy, weird, awesome stuff like that. But that has real world evidence of, like, they would go in and they'd talk to someone who was lost, and this person who was lost would give them information about, they were on a ship and they were, a chef or a galley crew, and that the ship's name was XYZ, and they grew up in this specific little village in Ireland, and all that stuff would check out. Like, they did the research after the fact, and all the information that someone that they would interface with would give them all this information, and then it would check out historically that there was a ship of that name, and it did sail from the port that they said it would sail from, and that there was a village that had that family name in it, and all this other stuff. It's like, you look for...
Have you done any of those courses?
I haven't.
You're strictly remote viewing right now.
I've done remote viewing. I did a gateway, which I highly suggest. Those are amazing because that gets you into the technology of binaural beats and what the technology can do regarding stimulating different portions of your brain to expand your consciousness, to basically kind of have a psychedelic experience without the psychedelics through technology. Amazing, amazing stuff. And this last one I did, they did the brain scan stuff in my brain while I was meditating, which is really cool to be able to see you have these experiences, right? You're wearing these headphones and you're experiencing these signals in your brain that are turning on different things based on the physiological result. But then you're able to go look at the brain scan afterwards and say, okay, was I really, viewing somewhere far off, or was that my imagination? And then you look at the brain scan, and the frequencies that your imagination are correlated to weren't even firing at the moment. So you're like, well, science suggests that's not my imagination. Like, I'm not filling in the blanks artificially. So maybe my experience was something far away. It's a cool place.
Yeah, I can't wait to check it out.
You gotta go.
I cannot wait to check it out. Do you find any correlation between me and you've talked a lot about psychedelics offline and here too in the last episode? Do you find any correlation between some of the clarity and intuition that psychedelics can bring you with what some of the stuff you're learning at Monroe Institute?
Absolutely.
Could that supercharge what you're...
Yeah, I think it's a different approach to the same location. Like, when you introduce an exogenous compound in psychedelics to your body, it's going to have a certain effect on what your mind is doing based on how it's affecting your brain, right? The receptors that are being filled by the chemical that are triggering different consciousness events within your mind, et cetera. And you have insights that are meaningful often, and different feelings that you don't normally feel when you don't have that chemical influencing you. Technology can do the same thing, just in a little different fashion. The experience is a little different, but it's similar. But it also delivers insight and can get you into that space where the same type of thing is happening in your brain, except your brain is supplying the chemicals that fill the receptors because of the stimuli that you're putting into your brain with the signals in your headphones. So it's similar, it's different, but it's still different from your regular everyday awareness where you're, driving around going to lunch or whatever. And it can certainly deliver insights. Like this last week, I went into a meditation, and it's a little personal, but there was some stuff between myself and my wife where we were just miscommunicating on this one thing. We have a great relationship. We don't usually have any problems, but there was one thing that was kind of just vexing me a little bit. And I went into that meditation with these signals in my ear, and I was able to get insight on how to handle that better than I had been. And those technologies helped me gain that awareness where I don't think I would have come up with that on my own. I mean, you've experienced psychedelics and I have too, and we understand the different ways we can see things when those chemicals are filling the receptors that they are, and they're allowing us to see things in a different way. The technology up there at Monroe helped me do the same thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I can get extremely intuitive when I am on psychedelics.
Yeah.
And, I'm always looking for the scientific explanation on why that happens, why I'm able to tap into, I guess I would call it a higher consciousness.
Yeah.
When I'm in the middle of a psychedelic journey, and it's been, it happens every single time. It's like everything's mapped out. And have you heard any good scientific explanations for that? I'm really interested in this. I don't know enough about it, and it might be way over my head, but this quantum entanglement stuff is really fascinating to me.
Well, funny you say that. I had an opportunity. John Clauser, who won the Nobel Prize last year, bought me way too many beers. I met him at the Berkeley Yacht Club, where he has this a couple of sailboats that he sails on the weekends, and he races in regattas and stuff. And I went to talk to him and hang out with him, and we had a lot of beers over a multi-hour conversation. There is no doubt that non-locality in quantum mechanics is weird to the point that we can't really understand it. And the thing that he won the Nobel for, by the way, he was looking to disprove entanglement on John Bell's equations rather than prove it. And he wound up proving it, and then they gave him the Nobel for it. That was a complete surprise to him because he thought he was going to disprove it because he was a fan of Einstein's interpretation and all this other stuff. But
do you have a good way of breaking that down? For
quantum mechanics?
Yeah. No.
Well, here's the thing. My theory on it, I've got an interesting theory that, some people are a fan of and other people's aren't. If consciousness is also a non-local field that we have not yet named, like if consciousness is one of those things that goes out infinitely and is attached to all the other fields, then consciousness is easily explained as the thing that collapses the wave function. And when you look at something, it reacts differently than when you don't look at it, because your loop and connection back into consciousness reaches non-locally into the collapse of that wave function and makes it happen. When you're accessing that information, when you're not accessing that information, it doesn't have to render into that place of actually being a particle. It can stay a probability. That's just a pet theory of mine, but it makes sense that, we're starting to prove, psychic ability exists. We're starting to prove that looking into the future exists through these almost irrefutable studies that a computer is controlled. Well, how would you explain all of that, including the collapse of the wave function when you're looking at something or not looking at something, besides having consciousness be a non-local field that's all tied into the whole thing? Because for me, that would be like if in video games, there's this thing called occlusion culling that allows the computer to operate a huge environment in a 3D game, right? It only shows you what you're looking at, just like quantum mechanics. There may be a huge world of 3D map in front of you, but it's not going to render the whole thing. It's only going to render what you can see so that it can have enough cycles to show you frame number 2. Because if it's got like in an infinite universe, if it's got to render the whole universe, you're never going to get to frame number 2. But if it only has to show you what you see, then all of a sudden it's showing you a bunch of frames per second that you can interact with. And that's what they do in video games. That's kind of, to me, how the universe works, where there's an infinite possibility of everything going on all at once, but the only thing that gets rendered into matter is the thing that you're interacting with at the moment. I don't know. I'm probably totally wrong. And everybody who understands physics a hell of a lot better than me, like, hate it. What a dumbass.
Oh, I'm sure they'll be in the comments. Don't worry. But
you're all right, by the way. Every one of you is telling me I'm wrong. You're right. I'm wrong.
Well, Shawn, I think, one, I cannot wait to get to the Monroe Institute and meet Joe.
Yeah, you got to
personally.
get up there.
I cannot wait for that to happen, and I really hope we can get him here. That would be a hell of an interview.
Yeah, I think so.
And a real honor. But it was a real honor to interview you for the second time, and thank you for sharing all that information. And I have a feeling we'll be seeing you again on this show. So if you'll come.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Maybe
anytime.
After I get to the Monroe Institute.
Yep.
I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more questions. So hopefully I have the capability. You know?
Yeah.
It kind of makes me nervous. I don't want to go there and...
Don't be nervous. Everybody's got it to a certain degree. Some people are better than others. I mean, there's no question that, people like Joe are amazing remote viewers. I got to meet Lynn Buchanan, who is an amazing remote viewer, who George Clooney actually played Lynn in the movie Men Who Stare at Goats, right? And while everybody makes fun of that movie, I think it's brilliantly humorous. That's an actual program, and that was a successful intel gathering operation. Lynn's another one of those guys who's just freaking amazing at looking at something and being able to give you the detail of it. And there's some folks who aren't as good at it. But just like anything else, LeBron James proved that, you can score 7,000 or whatever points in a lifetime of a career basketball. Well, he's the only one who's proved it so far. Other people can't shoot a basket to save their life. So there's going to be people who are better at it and not so good at it based on their physiological ability. But everyone can try to take a shot.
Well, I'm going to try to take a shot. So, I told you, I think it was at dinner last night, maybe it was at lunch, but I feel a lot of intuition.
Yeah.
And I can't explain it all. I've talked about several different occasions on a show here and there throughout, whatever we have. Right now we're sitting at 57 shows. I can't remember which ones I've talked about them on, but it happens so often where I'll be thinking of something, or I'll say something, or I'll throw something out verbally into the world, and it happens. That person there's too many coincidences happening, and it happens to me so much that I've sat both my parents down separately and asked them if they have had any of these experiences or if they're ongoing. And
What'd they say?
Well, they looked at me like I was crazy and they said no. But that's not going to keep me from exploring, because I want something is going on.
Yeah.
And I want to know what it is.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm hoping I'll get some answers at the Monroe Institute. So thank you for the invite.
No problem.
100% going.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
Can't wait. I can't wait to hear your report after you come back.
I hope you're there.
That'd be amazing.
I hope you're there.
We'll
Are you going to go into any of these other programs, do you think? Or
I'm going to try out the out-of-body experience one that they have in July set up. So I'm going to go up there again here real soon and see if I can pop out of my body. I've never done that before, but there's a sense from the people who have done so that it's more real than their physical reality that they experience when they're in their body. And they can, wherever they think about they want to go, they immediately go there and experience what's going on. And then the people who are in that location will report weird things going on associated with that person. Like someone who told me, they said, well, I popped back home and see what was going on there. And I was able to tell where my wife was, and she was there, according to her report of where she was in the house and what she was doing that he witnessed there. And that her screensaver or something on her computer froze on a picture of him on her computer where it was supposed to, go from picture to picture to picture to picture. It just froze on it and then wouldn't change. So like weird stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, that's full of those kind of stories. And if consciousness is a non-local quantum mechanics thing, then that kind of stuff can happen. And we need to get a better grasp on it if we want to take advantage of it all.
Man, this is going to take me down a lot of rabbit holes.
I can't wait.
Me neither. Well, Shawn, seriously, again, it's an honor to have you here. I love our conversations. I can't wait to see you again. And best of luck.
Thank you, brother.
And everything will be linked below. But yeah, safe travels back home. And seriously, I cannot wait to see you again.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers.